Welcome to my talk. This map is a facilitated portrayal of a conversation I had with Matthias Weitbrecht when we were first preparing for the first annual gathering 7 years ago, in which I was trying to capture the cartography of the very myriad disciplines that contribute to the work of personal and systemic transformation. And in part, I was trying to portray the notion that this particular craft is not simple. It's drawing on many different tributaries from multiple arenas of thought leadership and experiential learning. And to become a practitioner of this particular art form means to commit to a lifelong walk of learning and of healing. It's not something that can be assimilated through a weekend PowerPoint presentation at a business school. It actually requires living and breathing this craft of inner transformation and taking it on as a vocational impetus for your own life's purpose and your own life's walk. And this annual gathering is intended in part to be a place where one can do such learning and development in the context of a global community of friends, but also that we have a chance to share what we're all learning in what is really an emerging field that's only coming into form in our lifetime, where you're bringing together these very myriad worlds of what we might call best practice and next practice. One way to think about best practice, what we mean by that is simply to look at some of the tracks that you have this week. So best practice means looking at early childhood development theory, adult development theory, the domains of interpersonal skills, emotional intelligence, psychological safety, teaming, how to have team dynamics be high performing, how to do large-scale culture change, how to do organizational learning, how to induct adaptive and change agility, adaptive leadership inside organizations, and systemic thinking. So these domains, many of which have been pioneered and iterated at the Harvard University and MIT Sloan School communities, give us a lens for looking at organizational life and helping organizations to mature and to become more and more high performing. But they sit next to, for us, a series of next practices that have to do with the domain of consciousness evolution and human growth. And here you find other domains that are also well represented in the curriculum of the annual gathering: the field of neuroscience and neuroplasticity, the importance of integrating the various voices or inner dimensions of our psyche. My sister's pioneering work, Winning from Within, is one example, a sort of shining example of what that work looks like. The work of Hal and Sidra Stone in voice dialogue, Dick Schwartz's work in internal family systems would be other examples. The art of relational attunement. What does it mean to really receive in presence and in open-hearted compassion the experience, the story, and the heart of another? Somatics and embodiment, the work of helping executives to come lower than their neck and into their bodies and access the multidimensional intelligence that lives in our soma. The work of meditation and mindfulness. The dance of the poetics, what David Whyte calls the poetics, movement, poetry, singing, symbology. Accessing the beauty and inspiration and sort of activation of the ecological world around us, nature-based leadership, energy work, body work, and the devotional arts. So that synthesis of what on the one hand are a set of models that help us to diagnose and effectively intervene in systems, and what you might think of as activation practices that open our energy field to be more effective instruments of the qualities of spiritual and emotional maturity that we believe are increasingly essential for organizational thriving. So one way to think about the domains of transformational leadership is as concentric circles moving outward from oneself to the world. So starting with self-awareness, increasing your understanding of your own inner life, unlocking aspects of your unconscious into conscious awareness so you can integrate memories, sensation, fear, relational extension and attunement, increasing group coherence and connection, allowing systems to be flowing human systems instead of frozen life, and the field of collective restoration, which I believe we are in this room more and more called to put our attention on. One way to think about that map that I showed is that it has a vertical dimension and a horizontal dimension, and each of those has two fields. So the first part of the vertical dimension is the part of the work that's about looking down. It's about groundedness, it's about rootedness, and in particular, it's about excavating the unconscious, what Jung called shadow work. It's about understanding the underneath the overt behaviors, what's going on under the waterline, meaning people's innermost dreams, innermost fears, unmet needs, and the field of interpretation that drives the choices that they make in life. In particular, we've had our attention in the last years on unlocking facets of the psyche, this is Erica's methodology, that have gone dormant or deflated and are not yet available in the repertoire of a leader to access all of the transformational capabilities required to lead in complexity. And we've also had our focus on understanding the many generations of untreated trauma that shape the way people experience themselves, one another, and life itself. To move for a moment to the two horizontal domains, one dimension of horizontal attention has to be on helping people to create freedoms of self-expression and connection with other people. Too often, executives feel there's no one they could confide in, no one they can share their secrets with, no one they can even talk to about what's really going on in their inner life. And through this work, we can create harbors of receptivity in which people can tell the stories of their lives, can share the interiority of their emotional experience, can make relational requests, and even learn a relational vocabulary of how other people could support them. And I think perhaps most radically, we are taking as a premise that we need to dissolve the privatization of people's pain. The notion that therapy can occur in a private office as a one-on-one experience versus being seen as a collective responsibility to be entwined and woven into one another's healing, that day is over. The pain belongs to all of us. The responsibility and accountability to witness and receive is a shared one. And we've learned over the last 20 years that in a space of mutual holding, miraculous healing is possible. And then finally, we get to the top of the vertical dimension, which is however one might experience this, it's tapping into something greater than ourselves, connecting to source, acknowledging the presence of a higher power, helping people to make meaning of their lives by serving humanity, serving ecology, serving future generations. And that work, which is allowing the sort of mystery to start to move and touch us, is perhaps the place we will continue to be able to source and offer real inspiration and real refuge to people, particularly as things get darker. So I want to say a little bit more about all four of those domains. I said last year that there were two secrets in corporate life. And the first secret was the level of trauma, unhealed trauma, that people are walking around with in corporate life, and that executives are looking through life with and making decisions from. But I didn't really specify what we meant by trauma. So I want to say a little bit more about that. And partly I'm naming the specifics because having these events that are the contours of most of our lives be unspeakable in collectives is part of what keeps them in place as shameful secrets. And when we can talk about the reality that most of us have walked, and many of our parents have walked, and almost all our grandparents have walked, we start to open the door that we will not simply repeat the mistakes of our history. when we can start to name the truth of the trauma we walk in, the water we swim in, we have the possibility to have our future shaped by something more wholesome. So I have the great privilege of regularly running programs that are focused on helping senior leaders to turn their attention towards the unspoken dimensions of their life story and their ancestry. And as part of that process, we do a screening in which we ask people very systematically to share with us some of the details of their trauma. And what I'm about to share is a short list of the thousands of stories that we've been gifted with. People are born into poverty and economic scarcity. People are born into racism, colonialism, the illness or disability of a family member, the death of a family member, the early death of a child, environments in which their parents are not capable of caring for them and they become parentified children too early responsible for the care and well-being of their family, forced migration, bullying, being prematurely sent away from the family, or the parents moving to a new country to make a better life for their family and leaving their children alone and without their parents. Unpredictable accidents, addiction of all kinds, being raised in a religious cult, or the multi-generational effects of World War I and World War II, where you start to see in the lineage of a family people so traumatized by the effects of war that they're unable to express emotion and love and care for their children. And the children grow up in an environment in which affection and celebration and attunement is a scarce resource. So, because we have the privilege to be some of the people in the world that are alert to this real pandemic, I think the invitation for us is twofold. The first is to turn towards those broken and fragmented aspects and facets of our own hearts, and to increasingly be a wide, spacious, vastly loving cradle for the fragmented and terrified and abandoned aspects of ourselves. I can say for myself that's a 45-year journey, and I'm still walking it. It's not a weekend workshop, folks. This is a dimensional grace to learn to open your heart and let all those parts of your unconscious start to land inside you with a true welcome. But as you learn to do that for yourself, a very beautiful and holy thing happens, which is it becomes a natural yearning to extend that open-hearted receptivity to everyone around you, and to be the part of the world that receives their broken parts without judgment, without condemnation, just with gossamer love. And in the presence of that invitation that each of us can learn to inhabit, we've seen people start to integrate very early hurts and unlock the natural impulse for their contribution into the world. Because these two things are tied. The dimensions of us that are frozen in time in early hurt cannot yet give birth to the beautiful self-expression that we came into life to gift. So the first piece of work is the art of becoming a cradle for yourself and the generous gesture of bestowing that cradle to others. We have to be willing to sit in the fire of very painful life experience to do this work. So one of the things you're cultivating as you become a practitioner of this art form is the ability to witness and tolerate other people's pain. Because no one will bring to you the dimensions of their own woundedness that you're not ready to receive. The ceiling on what you can do with other people in this healing form is the exploration of what you are ready to invite, witness, see, and feel. I had an executive in a program a few weeks ago, and on the last day he came up to me and he said something I found tremendously beautiful, but also poignant. He said, "Amy, can I thank you for something?" And I said, "Of course, I'd be honored." And he said, "I want to thank you for helping me to cry the tears I've walked with all my life for 63 years. So on the one hand, that's really beautiful, that finally he found a place where those tears were invited. And on the other hand, it points to what we're not yet getting right in every conversation we have with each other, that we're not making that extension to really hear each other. Another story I thought to share is a man who came into one of our programs, very high, successful executive, lovely person. And he had been told for about 25 years through various diagnostics, psychometrics, assessments, that he just wasn't a very open heart. People found him hard to read. He seemed kind of cool, kind of aloof. And he'd been given some really practical advice like, hey, it'd be great if you took your team out to a baseball game, or could you take them out for some drinks, or make a little social connection with them. And he tried all kinds of gawky and awkward things. And he said on the last night of the program, he went up to a flip chart and he drew a security box. And in the box, he drew his heart. And he turned to the room and he said, "When my brother died when I was 11, I took my heart and I put it in a box. And until this week, I never felt safe enough to take it back out." He was radiant as he spoke this. And I thought, he will never again get the feedback that people cannot feel his heart. You don't have to teach him how to express his heart. You just have to give him the place to go back for the grief of the 11-year-old. The lovely thing in leadership programs that we've guided is that you can see how readily we yearn to be part of each other's homecoming. The group almost instantaneously melts into a field of listening, generous acts of kindness, support, mutual understanding, sharing each other's wisdom. We're born to be interdependent, and we instead put a primacy in organizational life on autonomy or resilience. But what we really mean by resilience is, it's really great that you don't need any of us. It's a distortion. Nobody can live like that and be fully vitalized and fully imaginative and fully generative. Owen Eastwood, who is going to be joining us later this week to offer his wonderful work on belonging, has this beautiful quote I love. He says, "In Maori culture, a word for leader is rangatira, which itself consists of two words, raranga, meaning to weave, and tira, meaning a group. So rangatira literally means to weave a group of people together. So part of the craft of transformation is learning how to create the conditions in which a group coheres to a higher level of love and understanding and kindness." Of course, we also have to look beyond the personal, intrapersonal, interpersonal, team, community, and look a bit at the systemic dimensions of organizational life and organizational thriving and society. I spoke a lot about this last year, so I'm going to leave it here just as a good list of things to have your attention on. So I was thinking last week, if you want to be homeopathic to a world that is increasingly crass and vulgar and violent and harsh, perhaps we need to move from a model of executive development to a model of executive refinement. Perhaps we need to start thinking about how we cultivate qualities of emotional and spiritual maturity, the yearning for justice, the quality of elegance, the quality of kindness, the impetus for affirmation and advocacy and championing others, leaving behind a kind of self-orientation to live in a field of abundant generosity, and more inhabiting the pulse of life as a pulse of abiding love. Thomas Hübel's teachings tells us that part of this art of refinement is letting go of the notion of strengths and weaknesses in the fields of coaching and human development, and starting to see that anything that doesn't show up as beauty is trauma. And anything that is a current derailer or looks dysfunctional in a current context has an antecedent in that same behavior having been a critical, brilliant survival strategy in early childhood. And when we start to connect the dots between all these fields that I'm pointing at, we'll be able to help people honor and bow to that childhood hero and set it aside and open their own field to a much more productive and self-expressive executive life. My sister's Winning from Within model does a gorgeous version of this in which she helps our field to move from simply training people in a series of skills or behaviors to looking at a model of emotional maturity and character development so that people could be counted on to bring to a complex context qualities of real soul maturity. It seems important to go back to the second half of the vertical and say a little bit more about the spiritual dimension of this work. So one thing to say is that it occurs in 3 different kinds of time. A practitioner of the healing arts has to have their time very intently on the quality of present time, being fully available to the interaction they're in the middle of, alert to what the zeitgeist and ethos of the society is calling for in terms of liberation, and being part of the reparative web of life. But it also has to look backward in time and think about the ancestry. You have to take your place in your own lineage, which means coming to investigate and understand who has your family been, what values did you inherit, what pain did they live through, what secrets are yet untold, what work of the family is yours to take on. It means taking account for the atrocities our ancestors participated in and doing anything we can to be part of the reparative process of making amends for those violations in divine law. It, of course, means honoring your elders, and maybe most importantly now, it means tending to the next generations. We also have to, if we're going to stay resourced and able to engage this multidimensional craft of repair, we have to have the ability and practices for helping us to tap into the eternal, that which is unscathed by the violence we've done to one another, that which remains intact, pure, unified, and numinous. That access to eternal time is what will enable us to stay open-eyed in the face of suffering and hopeful in the face of contraction. I love this quote Owen has as well. Each of us are part of an unbreakable chain of people going back and forward in time, back to our first ancestor at the beginning of time and into the future to the end of time. Each of us in this chain of people have our arms interlocked with those on either side of us. We are, in this sense, unbreakable, together, immortal. And Thomas connects the work of healing with the work of inducting the fresh wind of the future in this way. An open heart is like a membrane that allows the future to pass through it. An open heart is like a membrane that allows the future to pass through it. My friend Shai Tubali talks about 3 layers of the heart, and one way to think about what we're undertaking together this week is polishing the first 2 layers so that we can abide in the innermost chamber of our hearts. The first layer is the part of our heart, in a way you could say, we wear on our sleeve, that's being impacted by momentary experience, conversation, hardship, joy, success. It oscillates the outermost heart with whatever's going on in your immediate context. But what makes that particularly challenging is that the innermost heart reverberates with the middle heart. And our work begins with the middle heart. The middle heart are the historic hurts and the historic fears and the historic challenges of our lives, ours and our ancestors and our genealogy, that reverberates in response to the events of the day that are touching the outermost heart. And in that reverberation, we often can't distinguish what's coming because of the outside stimulus and what's arising because it walks with us all the time. So part of our work is helping people to distinguish the actual events that are happening out here from the historic activation that it produces. But the other part of our work is helping people to access the innermost chamber of the heart, what Shai calls the heart cave, what you might call the eternal flame. The innermost chamber of our heart is the part that comes into life connected to something larger, with a divine spark, with an inherent holiness and a closeness to our source that can never be hurt and never be damaged and never be other than what it is, part of the everything. And when we can help people to come home to themselves in that innermost peace, innermost equanimity, innermost sanctity, the resource they become for themselves and their family and every endeavor that they give their energy to is vast, maybe even infinite, you could say. Why does this matter? It matters because, as we can all see, we've been spending the last period of time and likely are to spend the foreseeable future in a time in which there is great pain and suffering in the world. And our ability to bring that quality of spaciousness and simple silence into the chaos will be a much needed manna for hungry hearts. My dear friend Sharon Salzberg says it this way: equanimity cradles the immense sorrow and wonder of life at the same time. Equanimity cradles the immense sorrow and wonder of life at the same time. Shai calls us to become these sanctuaries with these words: life isn't meant to become safe, stable, and unchangeable. We could equally say, life is unlikely in the near term to become safe, stable, and unchangeable. And therefore, it is you who are meant to become your own sanctuary. It is you who are meant to become your own sanctuary. It is in your power and your hands to create an inner world of rock-like stability. I should have had a rock and roll song ready for that moment. I don't. So I don't want to say a lot about the immediate context, but I think it would be fair to say that the times that we are living with are fraught with the extreme painfulness of a polarized world and the splits between good and bad, dark and light, us and them, spirit and matter. We are being asked to become forces of reunification. We are being asked to be so expansive in our awareness that those distinctions no longer take hold of our consciousness, no longer entrap us, so that we can be the receiving vehicle for all of life in all its contours, in all its expressions, in all its possibilities. I think what that asks of us is that we make a systematic moral inventory about which dimensions of life's pain we've turned away from until now, and to listen deeply for what facets of life's pain is calling us to attend. Last year I quoted Pooh, so this year I thought I'd quote Hobbit. Tolkien says, or Frodo says, "I wish it need not have happened in my time," said Frodo. And Gandalf, the wise elder, says, "So do I, and so do all who live to see such times. So do I, and so do all who live to see such times." But that is not for them to decide. All we have to decide is what to do with the time that is given to us. That's this moment, friends. We get to decide what to do with this moment of time. So I found some inspirational quotes from various teachers, and I thought I'd just end by sharing some of them. This comes from the wonderful poet Rilke. "How is the story going to end? This seems almost orchestrated to bring forth from us the biggest moral strength, courage, and creativity. This moment seems almost orchestrated to bring forth from us the biggest moral strength, courage, and creativity. I feel because when things are this unstable, a person's determination, how they choose to invest their energy and their heart and mind can have much more effect on the larger picture than we're accustomed to think. So I find it is a very exciting time to be alive, if somewhat wearing emotionally." So the last call I want to make is that we become, all of us, a restorative field. I think it's worth naming that in this room, for 7 years, you've had people from all over the world, from across organizational boundaries of companies that should seemingly be competitors who would not sit in a room and share their concerns, share their hearts, undertake their healing work together, learn together. And over, people have raised their hand, close to 1,000 now, to say, I want to be enough part of this restorative field that I don't care where you do your work, I care that you do it as well as you possibly can, because the world needs us. I think that's a beautiful thing. I think that's a thing that we should all be celebrating. And I think living and breathing in that community is itself a privilege and an act of radical rebellion. My dear, dear first teacher, Ram Dass, said this: "I've been asked many times whether this is the Aquarian age or it's all just beginning, or if this is Armageddon and this is the end. I have to admit, I don't know. Whichever way it goes, my work is the same. My work is to quiet my mind and open my heart and relieve suffering wherever I find it." You might distill everything Ram Dass taught over his many years of doing this work in a pioneering way to the 3 central teachings of his teacher, the great Indian saint Neem Karoli Baba, who said, love, serve, remember. Love, serve, remember. I love this too. This is from the writer Martha Postlethwaite. She says, "Do not try to serve the whole world or do anything grandiose. Instead, create a clearing in the dense forest of your life and wait there patiently. Create a clearing in the dense forest of your life and wait there patiently until the song that is yours alone to sing falls into your open cupped hands and you recognize and greet it. Until the song that is yours alone to sing falls into your open cupped hands and you recognize and greet it. Only then will you know how to give yourself to the world so worthy of rescue. I love this in part because I think it gives us a roadmap for inviting executives to slow their dives down long enough to hear what that sound of that song might be. Adyashanti says, "It is in the absolute surrender of all conditions and requirements that liberation is discovered to be who and what you are. Then the love and wisdom that flows out of you has a liberating effect on others. What I am describing is the birth of true love. What I am describing is the birth of true love." I think what he means is that wide, unconditional love has no opposition because it opposes nothing. Unconditional love has no opposition because it opposes nothing, which means it cannot be defeated. My beautiful teacher, Patrick Connor, said this: "In these poignant times of worldwide chaos, confusion, and crisis, there's never been more need or a louder call from the earth for the grace of real stewardship." For the grace of real stewardship. Enlightened leadership is not the domain of politics, but rather of self-mastery. That's a really important one to remember this week. Enlightened leadership is not the domain of politics, but rather of self-mastery. True leadership is not first and foremost the ability to direct the lives of others, but most of all to gain sovereignty over the forces of illusion, darkness, and fear in our own lives. So I'd like to close us by inviting everybody just to close your eyes for a moment. I'm going to take a few minutes in silence, and then I'm going to offer a prayer from our teacher, Thomas Hubel. May the quality that I radiate through my life crystallize so that I walk healing wherever I go. May the quality that I radiate through my life crystallize so that I walk healing wherever I go. So that I speak healing, act healing, think healing wherever I go. So that my transmission becomes stronger. So that my transmission becomes stronger. May the grace that shines through put words on my tongue every day. May the grace that shines through put words on my tongue every day. Put intuition into my actions every day. Put intuition into my actions every day. Put clarity into my vision every day. And innovation into my being every day. So that I may become part of the grace that I am serving. May the grace that shines through put words on my tongue every day. Put intuition into my actions every day. Put clarity into my vision every day. And innovation into my being every day. So that I may become part of the grace that I am serving. I dedicate my life energy to the higher will. I surrender my will to that higher will. I bow down to receive the river of life. I am here and I am available. I dedicate my life energy to the higher will. I surrender my will to that higher will. I bow down to receive the river of life. I bow down to receive the river of life. I am here and I am available. May we have a week of wild joy inside the cradle of our friendships together and pledge ourselves to this great work of restoration. Thank you, everybody, for coming. Have a great week.